Please join me in welcoming Al Gore.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Gary Hirschberg. Thank you for your very generous introduction, and on behalf of everyone here, let me say again, thank you and Meg for that very generous gift to Hampshire College at a timely moment. To the former presidents of Hampshire College, Chuck Longsworth, my dear friend Adele Simmons, Greg Prince, to the interim president Marlene Gerberfried, to the representative of the 5 colleges, the president of Mount Holyoke College, Lynn Pascarella, to the representatives of the staff and faculty and students and others and alumni, especially to Sig Roos, the chairman of the Board of Trustees. I also want to mention Gay Hill, who led the search committee that picked Jonathan. And most of all on this occasion, to my friend Jonathan Lash and Eleanor, and to their family. I am personally deeply honored to have been invited to participate in this ceremony because Jonathan is such a dear friend with whom I have worked for so long. We both went to Washington, D.C. in the same year, in 1977. He went to work for an environmental organization, NRDC. I went as a newly elected freshman member of the House. And we worked on a number of occasions on environmental issues when I was organizing hearings on global warming and toxic waste dumps and the rest. And then he went and did good work in Vermont at the university and the law school. And then he and I both went to new jobs in 1993. He took over as head of World Resources Institute when I joined with Bill Clinton, went into the White House as vice president. And one of the first things I did was to ask Jonathan to head up the President's Commission on Sustainable Development. And throughout the 1990s, we had the opportunity to work together very, very closely. He is a natural-born leader. Many of you have already discovered this, and you are very fortunate indeed, if you'll allow me to say so, that you have Jonathan Lash about to be installed as your new president. You've already found this out, but I was reflecting on all those years, Jonathan, and I think you've weathered them better than I have. I was in a restaurant with a friend not long ago, true story, and a woman in her 70s came walking in front of the table and just looked at me as she walked past. And I thought nothing much about it until a few seconds later, I noticed from out of the corner of my eye, the same woman coming from the opposite direction, just staring at me as she walked past. And so I looked up and I said, "How do you do?" And she took a step forward and she said, "You know, if you dyed your hair black, you would look just like Al Gore." And so I said, "Thank you, ma'am." And then she said, "You sound like him, too." So this is an unusual time when you're having this ceremony. you know, the economic situation and the situation around the world. I was talking to an economist and asked, how do you feel about the situation out there? And he said, well, I feel fine. And it reminded me, I see Ken Burns here, it reminded me of cousin Minnie Pearl from the Grand Ole Opry. When I first met Jonathan, in those years I'd go back to Tennessee and drive around my congressional district having town hall meetings. I called them open meetings. And I'd had a bunch one Saturday, and I was driving back to my farm and listening to the Grand Ole Opry on the radio, and cousin Minnie Pearl came on. And she told a story about a farmer who was involved in an accident. And he went to court, got a lawyer, sued the other driver for damages. And the other driver got a lawyer. And when the farmer got on the witness stand, this lawyer cross-examined him, and he said, now, isn't it true that immediately after this accident you said, I feel fine? And the farmer said, well, it's not that simple. You see, I was taking my cow to town in the back of my truck, and this fella came driving across the center line. And the lawyer said, wait a minute, Your Honor, I object. We don't hear a long, involved story here, or we're in the middle of a trial. Answer the question yes or no. Did you or did you not say after the accident, I feel fine? The farmer said, well, I was leading up to that. You see, I was taking my cow to town in the back of my truck. This fella came driving across the center of the highway and ran right smack dab into my truck and knocked it over. Threw me out and threw the cow out. I was on one side and the cow was on the other. The highway patrolman came up and took one look at that cow and said, she is suffering. Pulled out his gun and shot her right between the eyes. Came around to my side of the truck and said, how do you feel? So I said, I feel fine. I think there's something of that feeling in the air here in the United States and maybe elsewhere. You're looking at Greece and Spain. We feel fine about things. But let me say that I already knew a great deal about Hampshire, but I learned a lot more when I talked with Jonathan some months ago and in preparation for coming here. And I sat at lunch with Chuck and Polly Longsworth, who is a scholar of Emily Dickinson. And I know that it's sort of characteristic that when the building was named after Emily Dickinson here, there was a student protest by those who wanted to name it after Emma Goldman. And in a kind of a rarefied academic way, that kind of there's something in that vignette that captures Hampshire. But on this occasion, when Jonathan Lash takes this new position after a very distinguished record of outstanding success to this country and to the world, I do not exaggerate, his call to action on climate and his work in putting together a system of metrics for governments around the world and businesses and NGOs to use in measuring global warming pollution, and I could cite many other examples. He has done a truly extraordinary job, but I will make a prediction for you on this occasion that his greatest life's work lies just ahead of him here on this campus. You will hear So I found a verse from Emily Dickinson. We never know how high we are till we are called to rise. And then if we are true to plan, our statures touch the skies. You will hear from Jonathan his vision. Like Gary, I will not attempt to preempt it. But I want to say a few words before I close and make way for the principal address here. I want to say a few words to those of you who are students. The slogan, which has already been mentioned, "To know is not enough," could not be more appropriate to the time we now are living in. I want to challenge you to breathe life into that phrase. We know about the injustice in the world, and we know that it's not enough to simply know about it. I have seen in my lifetime examples of college students taking inspiring, motivating leadership roles in bringing about needed change in this country. I grew up much of my life in the American South, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee. The lunch counter sit-ins in Nashville were led by students your age. The demonstrations in many parts of the South that awakened the conscience of this country were led by students. And in my generation, I was somewhat younger than those who were leading that movement. I remember so clearly how my friends and I would ask our elders, "Now tell me again why it's okay to have laws that discriminate against Americans on the basis of their skin color." When our elders could not answer that question, change began to take place. I remember when I was older watching college students take on the evil system of apartheid in South Africa. I joined the board of a college in order to be a part of that movement, but long before I put my shoulder to that wheel, Hampshire College in 1979 was the very first school in the United States of America to divest from South Africa. I remember that during those years, the struggle sometimes seemed almost hopeless. There were times during the civil rights movement when the goal seemed so far away. Dr. King once said, "How long? Not long, because no lie can last forever." We see policies today, practices and common behaviors by governments and corporations that we know are wrong, and we know they have to change. When I was a student in college, I was inspired, as Gary was in his studies here, by a professor who was the first scientist to propose measuring CO2 in the global atmosphere. And it changed my life. I had no idea that it would at the time, because I simply assumed that if the facts were as he said, and I believe them to be, that this challenge would be taken up and this problem would be solved, and we would move on to new sources of energy and new patterns that did not pollute the Earth's atmosphere and cause global warming. But here we are in the year 2012, and we, the people of this world, are putting 90 million tons of global warming pollution into the Earth's atmosphere every 24 hours. 20% of it will still be there 20,000 years from now. We are told by some that it's not really a problem. We're told by some that it's caused by sunspots. That's not true. We're told by others that it's caused by volcanoes. That's not true. We're told by some that it just doesn't exist and that we should ignore the fact that every single National Academy of Science of every single nation on the face of this earth that has one says it is true, it is an urgent problem that requires an urgent solution. Every single professional scientific society in every field related to earth science or climate science says it is an urgent problem that requires urgent attention and must be addressed. 97 to 98% of all the climate scientists most actively publishing in the world say it is an urgent problem that must be urgently addressed. Now, there's some talk radio show hosts that say it's not. It's up to you. But my point is, we must respond. What the scientists tell us would take place if we did not is too awful to contemplate. But what will take place if we face up to this challenge is an opportunity. We are seeing the rapid reduction in the cost of electricity from solar photovoltaic panels and windmills. It is dropping dramatically. We need to move on. We know that we have to, but to know is not enough. We need to tune out some of what they're telling us. Corporations are not people. Money is not speech. We can afford to educate our young people. We can afford to give quality health care. We can afford to clean up the environment. We can afford to seize our own destiny. Let me conclude with one final story from when I was a young student. I was inspired when President John F. Kennedy announced the plan to land a person on the moon and bring him back safely within 10 years. And I remember again hearing elders of that time say that was a mistake. We've never done anything like that. That was a foolish commitment. But 8 years and 2 months later, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the surface of the moon. And the moment Neil Armstrong put his foot down on that lunar soil, there was a great cheer that went up in Houston, Texas, in Mission Control. The average age of those systems engineers was 26, which means that their age when they heard the challenge was 18. Those of you privileged to be at this magnificent institution that allows you and encourages you and motivates you to learn across disciplines and focus your penetrating curiosity on the subjects that most enable you to make sense of what the purpose of your life is and what you want to do to make this world a better place. You will have the opportunity to do things greater than you can possibly imagine. And now is the time. We need an American spring this spring. We need We need to occupy democracy in the United States of America. There's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We've got to go far quickly. And that's a fact. But to know that fact is not enough. We have to do it. We have everything we need to succeed. But with the possible exception of political will. But always remember this, political will is a renewable resource. Thank you very much.